So hello everyone and welcome to today's psychology industry webinar. My name is Sandra Hobson-Tate and I am a careers consultant for the School of Psychology here at Newcastle University. I'm delighted today to be joined by Emma Hunter and Atote Rinomhota. So in the first half of this webinar, each guest will be going through a short presentation to tell you a little bit more about who they are, what they do, and how their degree prepared them for their career. Okay, and then we're going to have about half an hour's Q&A. All right, thank you so much. We're going to hand over to our first presenter today, so Emma. So Emma Hunter is an assistant psychologist in Paediatric Neuropsychology at the Tees, Esk and Wear Valley NHS Trust. Over to you, Emma. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. So hello to everyone who has taken the time to join the call today. I really appreciate it. Hopefully I can kind of give you a good idea about my personal journey throughout Newcastle Uni and kind of progressing into my career where I am now. So I'm just going to kind of take you through and make it as digestible as possible. And then, of course, we're going to kind of do a bit of a Q&A at the end if I'm... We'll kind of have a look at my time at university first. So I did my BSc in psychology and I did my master's in clinical psychology, both of which were at Newcastle Uni, obviously. So as you all know, your undergraduate degree is 3 years, unless you kind of want to do a clinical placement, and then your master's is 1 year. And then during my time at university, I also made sure that I kind of got some volunteering in as well. So that mainly involved kind of asking my lecturers or my dissertation supervisors if they would be so kind as to take me on as a really keen psychology student who wanted to get some experience. So luckily enough, my dissertation supervisor in my final year of my undergrad took me on as a volunteer research assistant. So that was in the Institute of Neuroscience, which is in the medical building at Newcastle Uni. And then I was also quite luckily able to secure a voluntary assistant psychologist position at the RVI. But the great thing about Newcastle University is when you're in your final year, they give you the option to do something called a research apprenticeship. And you can choose kind of from a breadth of subjects and topics and supervisors. So I actually chose to do mine in cystic fibrosis, obviously the psychology side of that at the RVI. And that's a really great opportunity to have, and it's definitely come in handy in my kind of professional career now. So yeah, I would definitely kind of recommend it out there. I know you guys are kind of in the early stages of things, but it's always something to keep in mind. And then of course the pandemic hit, which we were all subject to. So I actually did my master's during the pandemic. So kind of it was all fine and dandy for the first half, and then obviously we were told to self-isolate. So then I had to write my whole thesis from home. But the great thing about the uni was that they were kind of super accommodating and, you know, checked in with me the whole time and made sure that I was kind of on track with things and offered support, offered extensions if people were kind of subject to stress or various mental health concerns as well. So that was really great to kind of have that support. But during that time, I also did some volunteering as a call and chat volunteer. So I was basically calling people who might have been struggling during the pandemic or who were kind of feeling lonely or struggling with mental health problems. And then I also did some volunteering as a youth mentor with Children North East, which are a really great charity. But I guess the main kind of thing that I was, you know, given from my undergrad degree and my master's was a huge selection of topics to choose from. So that kind of ranges from what your interest might be. So whether that's kind of more towards the biological psychology side of things, or the social psychology, psychodynamics, psychopharmacology, anything that you can consider within it. There's always that option for you to choose from, as well as your core subjects as well. So I definitely feel like a lot of my theory that I've learned at uni has kind of come into handy in my professional life. And then after I graduated from my master's, I secured a job as something called a children's psychological wellbeing practitioner. So this is kind of a career path that's only recently come to light, I think, more so in the world of psychology. It's kind of an opening door I found that was a little bit easier to get my foot into than assistant psychologist jobs. So basically what this role consists of was offering low intensity therapy to children and young people with really common mental health problems such as anxiety, depression, phobias, OCD. So yeah, that was a really interesting route to take me down, and it gave me a really good kind of foundation in CBT, which is something that you guys will learn throughout your course. And then with that came a postgraduate certificate in CBT. And then from that job, I then moved to my role that I'm in now, which is I'm an assistant psychologist in Paediatric Neuropsychology, which is such a mouthful for me to tell every single person who asks me what I do. But essentially my main role now is to kind of work within Durham and Darlington and kind of administer cognitive assessments. I also do therapy as well for children who kind of have mental health problems that relate to neuro problems as well. So I understand this is probably a lot of information for everyone to take in and for everyone to digest. But I hope it kind of gives a good idea as to where I've kind of come from my university and to kind of where I am now. And then I guess looking forward to the future, I'm hoping to maybe progress into a higher assistant psychologist role. So that's kind of an assistant psychologist with a little bit more bells and whistles around it, a little bit more fancy, I guess, and a higher band in the NHS. And then hopefully I would love to be where Atote is now, which is on the doctorate for clinical psychology. So I'm hoping to apply this year. And definitely kind of applying to Newcastle Uni as well, because they offer a great course. So yeah, that's kind of my views for the future. And I'm kind of keeping everything in mind in terms of where I've been from Newcastle Uni and how I still want to remain there, because it's a fabulous place to be. So yeah, a couple of top tips for everyone. I know university is super exciting, super nerve-wracking, and it kind of brings out a breadth of emotions in a lot of people. But I've found that it was really helpful to kind of, get your footing when you start your course, kind of take things day by day, but also get to know your topics and get to know your lecturers, because you never know when they might give you a voluntary research assistant job in your third year. But also just take your time. You have 3 years to figure out what you want to do, what path you want to go down, what topic of psychology you want to specialize in. It's such a massive umbrella of subjects, and there's so many different avenues to go down. So take your time. And I would always say, if you're considering kind of going into clinical psychology, is to just volunteer as much as possible, because as much as I love psychology, it's probably one of the most competitive careers out there, which I'm sure Atote can agree with. But I think the main thing is just to have fun. You guys are going to be at university, of course, studying hard, but it's also important to kind of remember to have that balance in life, which Newcastle as a city most definitely does offer. So I hope that's kind of covered most of the topic, and I hope it was digestible for everyone. And I will kind of hand things back over to Sandra.
That's great. Thanks so much, Emma. That was really good. We've got loads of questions. We've got loads of questions already coming in. We'll save them till the end. So Atote, thank you. We'll hand over to you now. Atote now is a first-year trainee clinical psychologist here at Newcastle University. So I'm sure you'll have lots of questions as well.
Thank you for having me present today and present about something that I'm quite passionate about. But as Emma was saying, it's quite a difficult competitive career trajectory at times. So as Sandra said, I'm a first year trainee clinical psychologist at Newcastle University. And I thought it would be helpful to briefly cover a little bit about my journey into training, and then talk about what life is as a trainee currently, and then relate that to you and you as potential future applicants, and then provide a few resources that you can have a look into for a bit more information. So I graduated around year 2012 with a bachelor's in psychology, so quite a few years ago. And my journey has involved a bit of a detour. So at some point I stepped away from clinical psychology as the path, because I did feel that it was particularly competitive, and I didn't know whether I had what it took to get into training. But I felt compelled to get back on track. So part of the sort of relevant research experience that I've built up, as well as clinical experience as a support worker and as an assistant psychologist, have worked together to shape my journey and make it what it is, and have helped to get me onto the doctorate. So as a support worker, I worked one-to-one with people with learning disabilities. I worked in a multidisciplinary team that was made up of physiotherapists, occupational therapists, nurses and others. I worked to create personalised care plans for the people that I worked to support. I learned Makaton and other communication tools just to bridge that gap in communication and empower the young people to make as many choices about their own lives as possible. And as a research assistant within the NHS, I was able to broaden my understanding and skills. And when it came to research, I worked clinically in that role too. And research assistant roles do vary. So some might have more clinical components than others, but as a research assistant, I was able to recruit participants. I was able to get involved with ethical applications, funding applications, and much more. And then as an assistant psychologist, I worked in about 2 to 3 different settings. But I think the best thing really about getting an assistant role is having that close contact with clinical psychologists that you might not get if you're working as a research assistant or support worker or doing something else that can help you get onto training, but that might not give you that direct access. And I think the good thing about having direct access to clinical psychologists is that you have them give you that information that is, well, when I was sort of on my journey earlier on, I didn't have that much information about what it meant to work in the NHS as a clinical psychologist. I didn't really know what that looked like, but when you're working directly with them, you see them, they model what it looks like really well. They give you lots of information about what they do. So even if you're not doing it as an assistant psychologist, you have that available to you. So that was really helpful. And that was what I think helped push me into getting onto training. It was having that access to speaking, communicating with clinical psychologists and seeing exactly what it was that they did across settings. And now, as a trainee clinical psychologist, I am a trainee at Newcastle University, which is, I think, a fantastic university for trainees in that it provides us with a really supportive base to learn from, and we're able to have a study day as part of our course on a Friday, which other courses don't have, or if they do have a study day, it might be half a day. But on a sort of given week, we've got our teaching day, which is typically a Monday, our placement days, which are Tuesdays, Wednesdays and Thursdays, and then our Friday, which is that study day, which is, I think, very helpful for us because it can become quite overwhelming whilst you're in training. You're juggling quite a few different demands, and actually the average age of trainees is about 28 years old, and so some people have children and sort of they've got marriages, they've got other things going on that they're having to continue moving on with despite being on the doctorate. And so having things like a study day, which Newcastle does have, just really helps to make life as a trainee that much more manageable. Whilst we're on placement, we're being evaluated, so there are lots of things that they're sort of wanting to make sure that we're meeting in terms of competencies. So these include assessment, formulation, psychological interventions, research and audit, consultation and training, and so much more, as you can see in this illustration by trainee psych scribbles. So life as a trainee can feel quite demanding, quite overwhelming, but I think depending on the course that you're at, it can feel a lot more manageable, and Newcastle's definitely one of those courses. In terms of how all this relates to you, so higher education in England has commissioned more than a 60% expansion in the number of trainee positions in the last few years. So I think for Newcastle, at some point in the last 4 years or so, we've seen quite a significant increase. So yeah, a few years ago, we would have probably had per cohort about 18 trainees, and now in the latest cohort, we'll have about 29 trainees starting. So it is definitely increasing, and it's not just within Newcastle, but across the country in different courses. And so that means what was incredibly competitive and difficult in terms of a career trajectory is becoming that much more accessible. And they're doing this partly to make sure that there are enough clinical psychologists filling the vacant posts that are in the NHS, but also hoping to diversify the workforce so that it's more representative of the service users that we often see. Lastly, I thought it would be helpful to share some resources that might be useful in your journey. They've been useful in my journey into training, and some of them will be useful even beyond once I qualify. So these include the Clearinghouse, and many of you might already know about the Clearinghouse for postgraduate courses, but that's where you would apply for clinical psychology training. So you'll see Newcastle as well as all the other different course providers on there. There's a book called Surviving Clinical Psychology, which is really helpful. It helps you sort of reflect on your personal, professional, political self in that sort of context of clinical psychology and wanting to be a clinical psychologist or practicing as one. And there are lots of YouTube videos, for example, Why Clinical Psychology, Views from a Trainee Clinical Psychologist. And for those of you who identify as working class, there are YouTube videos and a whole sort of group of people who identify as such, who are talking about this and how it relates to clinical practice. And of course, also for people who are from Black and minority ethnic groups, there are also groups out there that have been set up to help in terms of accessing mentoring, information. So there are a lot of resources. What I'm providing is only a bit of a snapshot of what's out there, but I hope that it does help with your journey. So that's me. I look forward to seeing the questions and hopefully responding.
Great, thank you so much for that. That's really comprehensive. Again, lots and lots of questions have come in, which I'm delighted about. So thank you to Emma and Atote for a really great insight. So first question is about volunteering. So was all the volunteering during your first year, or was it over the 3 years of your undergrad degree?
So I actually started, so I did obviously my undergrad and my master's. So I started volunteering probably towards the end of my second year. And I feel like that gives you plenty of time to kind of, if you're doing a master, and my master's as well, I did it during my master's year. So that kind of gives you plenty of time to kind of find your feet on the course and also just enjoy yourself for a little bit. So yeah, my volunteering started at the end of my second year of my undergrad.
Okay, and another question again about volunteering. How did you apply for voluntary roles?
I guess it's just kind of having a look and seeing what's out there. I would always suggest going to charities first. They're always super kind of welcoming towards psychology students, but also support worker roles as well, have some voluntary stuff as well. And like I said, for research stuff, you are in the hub of researchers, which is a university. Use it to your advantage, just ask.
Okay, Atote, one for you as well. How and when did you decide on your speciality?
I think that's an easy one to answer, and I haven't decided. I haven't decided, and that's a great thing about being on a trainee on placement. So we have about 5 different placements on the training program, and within we have exposure to a range of clinical populations, so children and young people, adults, older adults, learning disabilities, as well as in our final year we can decide to go down the specialist route, so we can try out forensics. So at the moment, I think it's hard to say. I've enjoyed working with children. I've worked within neuro, I've worked within learning disability, and I'm enjoying where I'm working now, which is within an adult mental health setting. So it's I can't say, I haven't decided yet. I think hopefully I will at some point, but I haven't decided.
It's work in progress. Emma, one for you. Who did you apply to for the voluntary assistant psychologist post?
So that was my role in the RVI. And this is probably another one of my top tips to when you're looking to start volunteering. Ask everyone, pester everyone. I went on nights out into the town and I used to start conversations with people to see if they knew anyone who worked in psychology. And I remember being at a bar and I met someone whose dad was a psychologist at the RVI. And I was like, please, I was begging him, I was like, please, would you mind asking him if they have any voluntary roles? So luckily he actually did ask his dad, and his dad got back to me and gave me the contact. So it's honestly, sometimes it's just potluck, I think. But again, a top tip is to just pester everyone until they get sick of you.
Yeah. Great. I would agree. Really important to get some voluntary and work experience there. So Atote, how did you balance your academic work life and also your role in volunteering as well?
So I don't currently volunteer, but I did when I was an undergrad. I think I was just tried to be quite disciplined. So I had my goals in mind. I knew what I wanted to achieve in terms of my academic side, and I knew that I also wanted to, whilst I was whilst I was doing my bachelor's, I wanted to get some clinical experience that would help me get a job post qualification, post completing that. We do. I think as a student and as an undergrad, we do have time. We've got pockets of time that we can dedicate to volunteering.
Mm-hmm. Dedication and determination, I think there. So Emma, how did you find volunteering with the call and chat service, and how was that beneficial to your role in paediatric neuropsychology now?
I guess, so when I was talking in the call and chat service, it was mainly adults that I was talking to, and it was over the phone. So it's quite different to the clinical population that I work with now, which mainly consists of kind of under 7-year-olds. So it's really different. But I think in terms of the similarities, sometimes I would get patients with dementia or kind of Alzheimer's disease, which relates to my neuro role now. So I guess kind of learning how to talk to different populations, learning how to make things clearer for different neuro presentations in terms of maybe patients who have memory problems or speech deficits. And also, I guess it was just kind of getting used to how to support people and what kind of tone to use and what kind of supportive language to use. Because even though I specialise in paediatrics, a lot of the work is done through parents, so that's still an adults population. So yeah, there are some similarities, but I think they were two very different roles.
All right, great, thank you. So Atote, another one. Are you doing now what you expected or what you wanted to be doing when you started your degree? That's a good one.
I think yes. I knew it was going to be challenging whilst being on training, because I'd spoken to trainees. I'd attended events a bit like this, where they gave an idea or a glimpse into their lives. So yes, I think I am doing what I expected to be doing. There are challenges, but there are lots of rewarding aspects to training, hence why I'm still here. But yes, I think to answer that question, yes, I am doing what I expected.
Thank you. And now, Emma, how long did it take you to go through the interview process for your volunteering roles? So if a student's going to come to Newcastle, what's the timescales there for interviewing?
It depends on where you're applying, really. For charity roles, it kind of varied from kind of a 1-hour interview, but it was very informal, to other roles, which was for my voluntary assistant psychologist role at the RVI. That was about a half an hour role. I hope I'm answering this question right, if that's what they're asking. So yeah, in terms of interview times, that's kind of what you're looking at.
It can really vary, can't it, depending on the organisation? Yes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even for roles in the NHS now, so I have an interview coming up next week, and that's only a half an hour slot. So sometimes they do that on purpose to make sure that you're concise with things, and that you don't waffle.
Good tip.
Yep.
So this is for both of you, actually. What work experience did employers find the most valuable, or what did employers have the most questions about?
I think your values, your ability to particularly if you want to go down the helping profession route, how you relate to other people, what happens when there's been a conflict, let's say in a relationship with someone else, it could be a colleague, a supervisor. How did you manage that? How was that for you? And what happened next after you tried something? So I think that's a big one. You might get asked about how you might get asked some specific questions about competencies. So if you do some volunteering, maybe that'll be a good opportunity for you to develop some competencies and skills that would lend themselves well to jobs as an assistant or as a support worker. So, for example, something like learning Makaton, learning something and then using it in practice that might be relevant for the post that you're applying for. I hope that's helpful. I think when I did my doctorate interview, I think they really wanted to get an idea of who you are as a person, and like Emma was saying, the interview itself isn't very long, so it's you have a short space of time to pretty much sell yourself, sell who you are, get an impression of who you are, your values, what's important, and how that sort of connects to the university and its philosophy. So you want to, I think, try to create a match with what you're saying to what they're looking for, and you get that by reading up on that website where the advert's been posted. So you check out the person spec, or you check out a little bit more information about the actual company or organization itself, and see what they say and try to tailor tailor whatever you say in the interview to that.
Interesting, thank you. Emma, how long are master's degrees in psychology?
1 year usually. There are some that might be a little bit longer, but the ones at Newcastle Uni are 1 year.
Mm-hmm. And Atote, I might ask the same question about how long is the doctorate?
It's 3 years in length, but for whatever reason, if that needs to be extended, I think it could be extended up to about 5 years.
Right, okay, thank you. So I think this one's for you as well, Atote. Did you find getting a job in psychology easy, or is it competitive?
It is competitive, like Emma was saying earlier. It can be competitive. It felt like quite a bit of a struggle getting my first assistant psychologist role. It's a bit easier with the support worker roles, especially if you've had volunteer experience. But the idea is to build your experience. So start with something like the support worker role, and then try to get the assistant role, or try to get the psychological wellbeing practitioner type of role that Emma's got or had, and work your way up. It's not necessarily easy, but they are, as I mentioned in my presentation, they are expanding the number of mental health professional posts out there. So hopefully it becomes a bit more accessible to everyone.
Okay, that's great, thanks. Emma, do you need to do the clinical psychology masters and work experience before you can then go on to do a doctorate in clinical psychology?
So with Newcastle Uni, they have something called a point system when you're applying for the doctorate. So it's kind of, they take into account what you got in your A-levels, they take into account whether or not you've done a master's, they take into account whether you've got any research publications, and I think, what was the other thing that they have a look at Atote?
Any teaching or training that you've done,
applications.
Yeah,
so one of those things that they have a look at is whether you've done a master's or not. So it does definitely help. In terms of people that I know that have applied for the doctorate, they have usually found it a little bit easier to get on if they have a master's, but it's not the be all and end all. it just provides you with a little bit more information. It's kind of that step up from your undergrad degree, and it's really good for extra research. In terms of work experience, you will almost definitely have to have work experience before you apply to the doctorate. So kind of one of the criteria is that you must have worked in a clinical setting in psychology for 12 months minimum. And that's pretty much all courses across the country, because you have to think you're applying to be a trainee psychologist. You are going to be trusted with people's mental health. They're going to have some expectancy of how you are and how much knowledge you have. They can't be letting people on willy-nilly to kind of take care of something that's really serious. So it's 12 months minimum, but a lot of people kind of work sometimes up to 2, 3, 4 years before securing a place onto the doctorate. So I don't want to sugarcoat it, but I don't want to kind of make it seem daunting, but it is quite a long road. Yeah.
It is very much. Atote, do you think a doctorate in clinical psychology will open more doors in terms of career opportunities compared to other fields within psychology?
I think it is a profession that is wanted. There are definitely posts out there that are still, that are advertised months on end without being filled. So it won't. I don't think I'll have any problems getting a job. And actually, in fact, third-year trainees currently who are due to finish in September, many of them have jobs lined up within the profession.
That's really, really encouraging, isn't it? And another question for you, what's the most rewarding part of your degree?
I think the clinical work is the most rewarding part. Learning is quite enjoyable, and then being able to put it into practice in the clinical sphere. I think prior to training, there's just a lot that you don't know, and a lot that you don't know that you don't know. And as you're going through that training experience, yes, it's effortful in that you're having to do all this stuff that you've never done before, and it feels that much more challenging, a bit like learning to drive a car. But over time, it becomes that much easier. And so I think that's a really nice process, and it's nice to become competent in something and to do something that is helping others.
Thank you. Over to Emma. How does the work to non-work balance change as you progress through the different courses that you've completed?
So I think with your undergrad, it's very nice because obviously it gets harder as you go along. So they don't just throw you into the deep end. But obviously, as you go along and as you progress through your degree and onto your master's, the expectations are higher, you have a higher workload, your exams are harder, and of course you have your dissertation at the end and you have your thesis. In terms of my work life, I found it really, really beneficial just to be quite boundaried with my time. So when I was doing my master's, so I worked also through hospitality all through my uni time. So I worked on bars and stuff as well, because you don't get paid for voluntary work. So when I was in my master's, I was going to uni 9 to 5. And then on a Monday, I would do my voluntary placement because I didn't have any lectures. So that was fine. I would do that 9 to 5. And then kind of on some days I would do voluntary research after uni, and then on other days I would kind of do bar work as well. So it was difficult, but obviously, it's up to everyone. Don't push yourself too hard if you feel like you are stressing yourself out or you can't manage it, because as we all know, we work in mental health, but it's super important for us to look after our own before we can kind of think about treating anyone else.
Great, thanks. Atote, you mentioned as well you have days on placement. Question is, do you get paid for those placement days?
The great news is yes, we do get paid. So as trainee clinical psychologists, we're given a band 6 NHS salary, which is quite good whilst you're training and you're earning a doctorate. So yes, we get paid for Monday to Friday.
That's the good news, because we often hear a lot of placement opportunities are all they're all free. You're expected to do it as part of becoming a psychologist. So that's good to hear. So Emma, would you say that a master's degree in clinical psychology is very flexible? As in, does it also allow you to explore other areas?
In terms of psychology, it lets you explore different areas and different topics within that. Obviously, if you're doing a master's degree in psychology, you can't be going off to lectures in quantum physics. But it does definitely let you explore areas within psychology. So I have friends that kind of specialize in developmental psychology in their thesis. I have friends that did forensics. Some did kind of health psychology, sports psychology, marketing psychology, business psychology. You know, it's really, really wide, and the amount of topics that you get to choose from is pretty good. So you can actually tailor it. I've always been interested in neuro, so a lot of my master's topics were kind of situated around neuropsychology and psychopharmacology, so the more biological side of stuff. But if you are not into that and you prefer the more kind of social side of psychology or kind of sports or psychodynamic, you know, then that's also something that the university kind of lets you explore. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, perfect. Another one again about the masters. How competitive is it to get onto it, and what are the best chances to increase your chances?
So usually in Newcastle, you need a 2-1 at the end of your undergrad degree. So in terms of competitiveness, it's not really too bad. I don't know anyone that didn't get on unless they achieved a 2-1 at the end of their degree. So in terms of increasing your chances, you can always put those little bits of voluntary work on your application, but they're pretty accepting of most people that apply, as long as they meet the requirements.
Okay, that's great. Now, talk to you about the doctorate. Do you need a certain level, subjects and grades to apply for the clinical psychology doctorate?
Yeah, you do. On my slide, I had the Clearinghouse website, which is where we would go to apply for the doctorate courses. So that has a bit more information about what's expected for Newcastle University as well as other universities in terms of what they're looking for. So some universities will say you need X number of A's, or we want you to have a 2-1, or we want you to have a master's on top, or so they say different things. From memory, from when I applied to the doctorate, I think it was the 2-1 that was required. I don't think they specified anything in terms of A levels, but I think Emma would know, I think now that you're applying this year, whether they've changed anything or whether they did have something on there that I might have missed or completely forgotten about.
I think they did have something about A-level grades, but I think it's more looking at your uni marks and stuff. So
again, Emma, do you find it easy to switch off at the end of the day after work and studying?
Yes, because I am kind of that type of person. I like to kind of dissociate my work life from my personal life, and I'm quite good at doing that. Whereas some people find that really, really difficult. So it really depends on you as a person and kind of, you know, how accustomed you are to what kind of work you do. So my job is, it can be a little bit difficult, and dealing with children as well. Obviously, they're extra vulnerable. So it can be hard to switch off. But if you find your own techniques on how to do that, it's trial and error. You'll kind of find your own coping mechanisms to do that. For mine, for example, as soon as I get into the car, I like to put a playlist on that kind of takes my mind off of things. And then by the time I've got home, I've processed the day. And then I'm kind of in relaxed mode or social mode if I'm meeting people after work.
Sounds good. So Atote, are work experiences easier to achieve in some parts of the country, for instance, like London?
I'm not too sure, because I would say there are. So I grew up in London and went to uni in Kent, and also worked in Kent and London and a bit of Essex and Leeds. And now I'm here in Newcastle. It's a tough question to answer. I think it's just about maybe whether you can scope out what's around you. I think there's always some voluntary role that you can take up. There's charities around, so I suppose unless you live in the countryside and don't have access to transport, it might that would probably make it that much trickier, but otherwise there are lots of organizations wanting some support who might not be able to pay for that support, and that's where volunteering comes in handy.
With regard to that question as well, I'm the careers consultant for psychology, and my focus is very much about helping you get voluntary work. So very much from stage one, that's the message, and there's lots and lots of support there to help you. So I think that hopefully should answer the question as well. So another one, I think now this one is Emma. Have you encountered any barriers in your studies or work life?
I mean, I think I would be lying if I said that, you know, it was a smooth road, because it's definitely not. I think for me, I suffered from some burnout in my master's because I was juggling maybe 4 things at once. So luckily, I guess at that time, it was kind of juggling my hospitality job and bar job, my voluntary work, research work, and then uni on top. So I guess that was a bit of a barrier. And then I guess in terms of studies, sometimes you can get yourself a little bit flustered about exams. And I guess it's just kind of taking things as they come, making sure to remember that your mental health is a priority as well. I know a lot of people that I went to uni with as well kind of, you know, experience the exact same thing. So everyone in your cohort will be in the same boat. So yeah, I guess stress is probably the biggest barrier that we face. But if you learn how to manage it, then, you know, it makes life a lot easier.
So we're approaching nearly 2 o'clock. We've still got so many more questions for you. I'm just going to ask one last question to Atote, and then I'll go to you both for the final question. So again, this again links with what Emma's just been talking about. So Atote, do you ever find it difficult to work with patients struggling with their mental health, and do you have any methods to manage that?
I think the answer to that it would be sort of a rudimentary yes in a way. I think as when we're exposed as humans, when we're exposed to the distress of others, you know, it can elicit distress in us, and actually we might have to work on developing a distress tolerance and, you know, widening that. After a while, when you've worked with a number of people, I think it does happen. You do become a bit more used to that, more tolerant of that. And in terms of how I manage that within myself, supervision is a great way to do it. So talking to your supervisor, spending some time just reflecting about it, but also you can also do a lot of self-care for yourself. So Emma was saying that she's able to get her playlist on and just switch off after a bit of listening to that. So for me, I like to be quite active. I like to socialize with my friends, my family. I've got tennis this evening, which I'm really looking forward to. So I just make sure that I've got things in my week so that they're just rewarding, helpful, enjoyable things that I do that take my mind off work and maybe the distress that I come in contact with.
That's great. And just whilst you're on, just one final question for you, and this is it. Considering your time at university and your own career, what one bit of advice would you like to share with our partners students?
One bit of advice I would say is, and it's a piece of advice that my dad gave me in a way when I told him about how competitive the journey can be into training, and he just said, compete then. And I suppose, yeah, it is that encouragement just to, if it is something that you want to do, to be determined, to persevere. But also, I suppose, with that in mind, there are definitely lots of other things that you can do within the helping professions that might encompass the sort of values that you hold that make you want to help other people and do something within healthcare. So I suppose, yeah, work hard, be competitive, be determined, but also keep that broader sort of picture of other things that you can sort of do if actually you try it out and you decide, okay, I don't want to do that, you might, yeah, if you get an assistant psychologist post, for example, and decide, okay, psychology is not for me, it's giving me exposure to clinical psychology work and it's not what I'm interested in, then you might think, okay, there's something else that has similar values, and it could be physiotherapy, for example, which might be a bit more active. Or yeah, so yes, I think be determined and work hard and keep that broad picture.
Fantastic. And Emma, the same question to you. Considering your time at university and your own career, what one piece of advice would you like to share with our partner students?
It's really difficult to condense it into one. I think along the lines of what Atote said is just be persistent. You know, I kind of probably annoyed loads of people constantly asking them if they would consider me for volunteering. But also I think find your unique selling points and use them to your advantage. Everyone has them. When you feel like things are getting really competitive, take a step back and think, what do I have that the next person maybe might be lacking, and kind of use that to your advantage. That could be, like Atote was saying before, maybe your background, maybe where you grew up, maybe what experiences you already have through your life. So yeah, find something unique about you and kind of use that to play ball. But most importantly, you are kind of coming into what should be, you know, the funnest years of your life as well at uni. You're in a great city, so just have fun as well. Psychology is competitive and it is a long road, but enjoy it along the way because it's super worth it.
That's absolutely fabulous. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Atote. Thank you, Emma. Now that's the end of our partner session for psychology. Thank you everyone for joining us. I really hope that you've enjoyed the session as much as we have.